this is not going to be a tough battle. In my opinion, not going to be tough. Just like when Ontario charged us, everybody said, oh, they just charged. I said, this will be won in 1 hour.
Are you planning to increase the tariffs against Canada?
Well, it could happen. If they do anything, we will. Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years.
In a bold and controversial display of economic nationalism, the administration of President Donald Trump formally enacted sweeping new tariffs, imposing a significant 25% tax on all incoming shipments of steel and aluminum. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update.
United States for many years, they don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a in 1 hour, and they announced what we were going to do, and they withdrew their little threat. And what they don't say in Canada is that
decisive action, a cornerstone of his campaign's America First philosophy, was put into effect with an uncompromising stance, eschewing any exceptions or exemptions. This move represented a dramatic and forceful pivot away from the established global trade agreements and collaborative frameworks that have governed international commerce for decades. The potential ramifications of this policy were immense and far-reaching. Economists and industry experts alike warned that the elevated cost of raw materials would invariably be passed on to consumers. This price hike was projected to affect a vast array of goods, from the fundamental components of vehicles and the foundational materials for construction to everyday household items like appliances and even the cans used to package beverages. The anticipation of these rising costs fueled widespread concern about potential inflationary pressures on the U.S. economy. As Clark Packard of the Cato Institute insightfully noted, it was not merely a theoretical risk. He expected the tariffs to pretty quickly show up in prices. This sentiment resonated deeply with those worried about the real economic burden this policy would place on American families and businesses already navigating a complex economic landscape. The lack of flexibility in the policy immediately created tension and uncertainty across global markets, retaliation, and the deepening of geopolitical fault lines. The unilateral imposition of these tariffs was met with swift and resolute pushback from major trading partners around the world, who viewed the action as a direct threat to the principles of free and fair trade. The European Commission, acting as a unified front for the bloc, wasted no time in announcing its own counter-tariffs. These retaliatory measures were planned to target a staggering 26 billion euros, $28 billion, worth of U.S. goods, setting the stage for a potentially destructive tit-for-tat trade conflict. This strategic response highlighted the deep-seated frustration and resolve of international allies to not be intimidated by the U.S. policy shift. Similarly, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, expressed profound disappointment at the lack of exemptions for close allies. He candidly labeled the U.S. action as an act of kind of economic self-harm, a sentiment that captured the paradoxical nature of a policy designed to help one nation by potentially hurting others. Marles also made it clear that Australia would be compelled to seek out new markets for its steel and aluminum, underscoring how such protectionist policies can not only strain alliances, but also trigger a profound global realignment of trade flows and economic partnerships. The most dramatic and unexpected fallout, however, unfolded with Canada, the United States' closest neighbor and a long-standing ally. The tense atmosphere in the days leading up to the tariffs' implementation was punctuated by a heated exchange. President Trump had issued a stunning threat to double the tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. This threat was framed as a direct retaliation for a previous proposal by the province of Ontario to increase electricity prices for U.S. customers. This looming crisis was narrowly averted when Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford, agreed to suspend the province's proposed 25% surcharge on electricity exports. The de-escalation of this specific conflict offered a brief period of calm, leading to a temporary stabilization in financial markets. In a gesture of diplomacy, Premier Ford announced his intention to travel to Washington for high-level discussions aimed at revising the U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, a crucial trade pact that was already under renegotiation. The episode revealed the fragile nature of economic relations and the powerful, immediate impact of political rhetoric. The rhetoric of conflict and a forceful defense of sovereignty. The economic dispute with Canada quickly transcended its initial trade-based origins, morphing into a much broader political conflict fueled by an increasingly aggressive and provocative rhetoric from the U.S. president. The president's threats expanded beyond steel and aluminum to include the highly integrated automobile industry, where he ominously warned of tariffs that he claimed would essentially permanently shut down Canadian auto manufacturing. His language grew even more confrontational and striking as he openly entertained the idea that the U.S. should absorb its northern neighbor. He repeatedly and provocatively referred to Canada as our cherished 51st state, arguing that American statehood would magically eliminate all trade barriers and render the border an artificial line of separation. This rhetoric, designed to intimidate and assert dominance, instead produced a powerful and rare display of political unity and national resolve in Canada. The incoming Prime Minister, Mark Carney, responded with a forceful condemnation of the U.S. actions, characterizing them as an attack on Canadian workers, families, and businesses. In a widely celebrated and impassioned speech, he made a resolute pledge to maintain Canadian counter-tariffs until the U.S. demonstrated respect and make credible, reliable commitments to free and fair trade. In a moment that brought a standing ovation from the Canadian Parliament, he declared unequivocally that Canada never, ever will be part of America. The diplomatic friction was compounded by reports that the Trump administration was mulling over new immigration regulations that would require some Canadians staying in the U.S. for extended periods to register personal information and be fingerprinted. This significant departure from the previously frictionless travel between the two nations served as another tangible sign of the deepening chasm between the two allies, the economic aftershocks and the growing shadow of recession. The implementation of these tariffs and the ensuing trade disputes sent powerful shockwaves through global financial markets, contributing to a period of heightened volatility and uncertainty. The escalating international tension was a key factor in a significant stock market sell-off on Wall Street, with the Nasdaq Composite Index experiencing its single worst daily performance in nearly 3 years. Shares of major U.S. automakers, including industry giants like Ford Motor and General Motors, saw sharp declines as investors braced for the impact of rising metal costs that would inevitably squeeze corporate profits. In a clear and tangible sign of market anxiety, the price of aluminum on the U.S. physical market skyrocketed to a record high of over $990 per metric ton, a direct consequence of the new tariffs. This pervasive economic turmoil fueled widespread concerns about a potential U.S. recession. Ontario Premier Doug Ford did not mince words when he appeared on MSNBC, placing the blame for any future economic downer directly and squarely on the U.S. president. He stated with conviction that if we go into a recession, it will be called the Trump recession. Ford had previously showcased the depth of the animosity and the high stakes of this trade war by threatening to cut off Ontario's energy supply to the U.S. in response to the tariffs. These events collectively underscore a critical and powerful lesson: a shift toward protectionist policies, while often presented as a way to protect domestic industries, can paradoxically lead to widespread global economic instability, severely strained international relations, and significant market disruption. Ultimately, such policies risk isolating a nation from its most crucial allies and creating a more fragmented and unpredictable global economic landscape, one where mutual trust and cooperation are replaced by a climate of suspicion and economic brinkmanship.